Welcome to the Emblazers show, where B2B leaders are igniting revenue. I'm Abby Kerr, your host, and today my colleague and co-host Tim Riesterer is joined in conversation by Dr. Nate Hartmann and Tiffany Moceri. Together, they embarked on a really interesting research project, and the question at the heart of the project is, what really sets top-performing account executives apart? Before we go to their conversation, let me give you a little background on our guests. So, Dr. Nate Hartmann is Associate Professor of Marketing and Innovation at the University of South Florida and Senior Researcher with the Center for Marketing and Sales Innovation. Nate's work explores how data and AI can improve sales effectiveness, boosting revenue, conversion rates, and customer retention. His research has been published in top journals, recognized with the Hunt Maynard Award, and applied by companies looking to turn insight into real sales impact. And that's where Tiffany Moceri comes in. Tiffany is Vice President of Product at Infinity. She leads the development of scalable solutions that connect innovation, sales, and service delivery, like Infinity's Innovation Lab, Buyerlytics, and BPO offerings. With experience spanning operations, training, and inside sales, she brings a rare end-to-end view of how to turn complex challenges into simple, scalable results. Let's go straight to their conversation.
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to have Tiffany and Nate here today because this is a collaboration that you don't always get to see, where you get rigorous academic research by someone like Dr. Nate Hartmann, and you get real-world practical selling experiences and activities represented by Tiffany and the company Infinity. And just to give everybody a little background of what's happening here is, Tiffany, your company runs sales programs for B2B companies in the areas of business development and sales development, right? Appointment and meeting getting, retention, renewal type motions, even full funnel sales motions. So within that, you guys are generating data. People are just going about their jobs, getting meetings, selling stuff or renewing stuff. And you get a lot of data that accumulates, and you were gracious enough to share that with Dr. Nate Hartmann, who studies this kind of data and looks for trends and insights on sales and sales performance. And getting access to real world data, Nate, makes research practical, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
All right. So with that level set for everybody, let's jump into a recent research project that leveraged the data set from Infinity, and Nate got to dig into it. And it took a look at and uncovered some things about, can I say, sales performance and motivation, and what makes salespeople tick and what makes them tick better. I don't know if that's the best way to say it. So Nate, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you got from Tiffany and the crew in terms of data, and then how you set about looking for the insights, and then we'll dive into the insights.
Yeah, and so what we were really focusing on was trying to better understand what factors differentiated the A players from the B and the C players. And so in order to do that, what we ended up doing is having several meetings with the executive group and trying to come up with a short list of these factors. And then we stress test those, so to speak, with some interviews with managers, and came up with a plan to collect measures through survey, and then being able to pair that with a lot of data that Infinity already had available. And that data was activity data in the CRM system. It was employee personnel data. In being able to combine all these different sources allowed us to come up with a more holistic perspective about what it was that differentiated these top performers from some of their peers who were still good performers, but may not have been performing as well.
So Tiffany, you hire that staff, you train and develop that staff. And I'm sure as a lifelong practitioner on the sales side, you have your sense, your opinions, your gut that tells you what makes a good salesperson and what motivates them to be better. Before we reveal the findings, did you have any preconceived notions going in? And tell me a little bit about that experience and what you see in the teams that you manage.
Yeah. So I started on the phones. So of course I went in thinking, okay, I know what the answer is going to be, right? Because I know what motivates me. And with working with our different clients and the different teams, you definitely see some skills and some traits that come out with some of your top performers, but that's more of a perception or a gut feeling. You don't really get to look into the data and the day-to-day behind it. And so we wanted to move past what that gut feeling was and move into some science data facts and get a real understanding of what motivates our folks that are top performers and to see how we could drive that success a little bit further.
Yeah, and I love it because you work with clients in different industries. Like I said, different selling motions. So we got a good look at a cross section of seller types, seller motions, and company types, and we'll just say transaction types. So again, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure Nate appreciated getting access to that data. I don't want to prolong it. What were some of the surprising counterintuitive findings, and what other findings, Nate, would you say confirmed what maybe our instincts told us?
Sure. And so I think what's important here too is to provide a little bit of context. And so what was really interesting about this research effort is I think it was very different from how it is that most organizations and sales researchers are looking at salesperson performance. So what we're often doing is looking at things like quota, how much somebody exceeded quota. But what we tried to do is create an agent comparisons that were permitted us to look at apples to apples. And what I mean by that was that we wanted to account for the fact that we were looking at different business units, that certain agents might be working during times or certain days that were more likely to lead to a sale or have a greater call volume. And so we ended up coming up with some predictive models that allowed us to be able to come up with an expected number of calls that an agent should have been handling every hour. And then also what their expected likelihood of making the sale was in any given call. And what was very interesting about this approach, because of the rich data that was provided, was it then allowed me to create performance metrics that looked at how much their actual calls handled and their actual likelihood of success deviated from expectations. And it was based on these deviations that we ended up discovering some insights that I think are very interesting.
I just want to be clear, when you're saying agents, you mean real human sellers doing things?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the word agents anymore, like everybody's like, wait, are we talking about AR agents? So these were real humans, real human activities, just to make sure the audience
I can verify real humans, real programs. So
yes, there you go. Sorry, Nate, back to you. Just to
Absolutely. And in Affinity too, they're referred to as account executives. And so I'll refer to them as account executives from here forward. But what we ended up looking at, and again, this was informed through the conversations that we had with the executives and also the managers in research that's been existing, is what were some of the reasons why they were working at Infinity? So what they're trying to get out of that employment operation. And then also, what were their selling skills? So we looked at key selling skills and then motivational factors, as well as resilience and emotional intelligence. And to me, what was really interesting is that the literature would suggest all of these things are important. But what we ended up finding was that some things were very, very important for reasons that were unexpected or in ways that confirmed what we would thought. And so in terms of the expected findings, what we ended up finding was that the top performers really had a high level of meaning and purpose that they received from working at Infinity. They found the financial incentives to be desirable, and that was something that drove them. And then also it was job security. So they wanted to make sure that they were going to keep their employment. That was very critical for them. And then when we dug deeper and we looked at some of the skills, there were really two skills that differentiated the top performers from everybody else. And it was their ability to use adaptive selling. So being able to change how they were saying things and what they were focusing on from one customer to the next. And then also being able to handle objections very well. And so it was these skills and motivational factors that really, again, differentiated the top performers from others in the organization.
So Tiffany, you said you wanted some science. Anything in any of this that affirmed or surprised you in these initial sort of findings?
Yeah, the items that I had thought were going to be the top drivers were not. So that was quite surprising for me.
Well, tell us more. What were you expecting to be the top drivers?
Back in my day, Tim, money, right? That's like the main incentive that you always hear of salespeople. They're driven by money. And while that's still a factor, it wasn't the number one factor. And I can really appreciate how the account executives were looking for a purpose, right? They wanted their work to have purpose. And that means a lot. And I love that now we can go and look for those behaviors and to find those employees that really want that purpose behind the work that they're doing. And, to be clear, Dr. Hartmann's data doesn't say that recognition is bad. It's just that it's status chasing is, the primary motive that correlates with lower performance. So it was very interesting overall. And I was pleasantly surprised with the data that he provided for our employees.
Yeah. And in fact, it was meaning and purpose, which turned out to be the largest positive driver of who was in that high performance group.
That's interesting to me is that it's sort of soft. It feels, and I think that's what you were getting at, Tiffany, is that meaning and purpose. How did you, I don't know if this is the right way to say, how did you suss that out? How were you able to actually see that versus just feel that? I'm curious how that shows up.
Yeah, so what we do is we are using established measures in the literature. And so everything that we've examined in terms of a survey has been used for oftentimes 10 to 100 other research studies. And so in particular, we had just assessed people to evaluate how important certain characteristics were to them. And then we use that in what was called basically a logistic regression in order to predict class membership, with class membership being here, whether they were in the A performer group or not.
Got it. Fancy words there, but I did figure out what you just said. So there were some positives. Now, you mentioned money. Money still showed up as having a positive impact, but maybe didn't shine as number one. Maybe, Nate, just for a little clarity on that for us, in your mind, where does money still fit financial gain for a salesperson's motivation and performance?
I think money is certainly important, but what we're seeing too, especially amongst younger generations, is that other aspects of the job is very important to them as well. And I think too, if we think about what it is that drives somebody to work on themselves to become a better salesperson, it's often the things that are more meaningful and fulfilling that I would consider to be tied to things such as meaning and purpose, rather than outcome-based awards, which do a great job of driving action, but may not require somebody to really think and develop themselves to the depth that things such as meaning and purpose would.
Are you seeing that as you hire and recruit, Tiffany? Are you sensing that now? Can you see it more, maybe even more clearly due to this data in the next generation of sales talent you're hiring?
Absolutely. It was probably there all along, but now that we have this data, we're actually able to see during our hiring practices. A lot of folks these days, they're not looking to be, that next level sales manager. They want to be an individual contributor and they want to feel good about the work that they're doing. And so we're able to tailor those different career paths, even if it is an individual contributor. And we can see that during our hiring process and through the behavioral questions that we ask. We talked about this earlier. We have multiple different clients. So we have multiple different hiring profiles that we need. So it's nice to be able to go into each client and tailor a specific profile and know what the top performers' skill sets and behaviors look like. So that way we can make sure that when we're hiring for those programs, that we're able to execute at a very high level for each client.
So I heard you say earlier, and Nate, maybe tell us what the data told us, which things actually impacted negatively performance. And maybe were there any surprises in that group?
And so there were two things, and it was very interesting because there were things that I wouldn't have expected. The first was that we found people that had a greater need for recognition were less likely to be in the high performer group. And then also people that were seeking advancement opportunity were less likely to be in the high performer group. And I thought that this was a very fascinating set of findings.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating set of findings, but now we got to dig into it as to why? Why do you, now maybe the data didn't tell you why, but do you have a hypothesis as to why? Because it's we always want the driver, somebody who's seeking advancement. And, this, I'll ask Nate and then I'll ask you the same question, Tiffany. So Nate, from your empirical perspective, why did this thing turn out to not be predictive or indicative of high performers when in reality, I feel like we've kind of been looking for this and hiring for this?
Well, and I think part of the reason could be is that those individuals that may want this recognition and advancement opportunity are also people that are going to be less satisfied with the status quo. And when you're less satisfied with the status quo, you may be less motivated to put in the effort and the motivation in order to be successful.
So they're looking kind of past this opportunity, and as a result, then don't perform as well in it because they already mentally are like doing the next job. I don't know, Tiffany, would that be an accurate sort of way of thinking about how that really does end up manifesting itself?
Yeah, instant gratification is a real thing. And some folks have a hard time waiting. And with, promotions, sometimes they take time, especially with people nowadays. They want that promotion right then and there. So kind of to what Dr. Hartmann was saying is, maybe these folks are just not willing to wait it out. They want to get that promotion right then and there. And if they're not seeing it right away, then they might lose some of that drive. Maybe this is your study number 2, Nathan.
We will talk about the next study because I think that some of this bears digging into further. And then I want to know what else you think we should study. But yeah, I do think it's fascinating to think about this, that there are people who are actually very comfortable in the individual contributor role. And when they are, and they have a good mindset about that, they perform well. And we might have looked at that person and said, well, they lack ambition, and I don't think I'm going to hire them. And then we take the highly ambitious person who then is impatient and doesn't do the job we hired them for well. Nate, did I summarize
Absolutely.
that well? Okay. Well, there you go. That was worth the price of admission to this podcast today, folks. That nugget of hiring turns everything upside down in my mind. So let's talk anything else in this study, before we start talking about what else is studyable. Anything else in this study that the folks should hear? If I'm a hiring manager and a coach of salespeople, anything else I should take away that you found tangibly, Nate? And then I'll ask you the same, Tiffany, that again, this could be extrapolated to me because these are business to business salespeople. What should I do different tomorrow?
I mean, there's a couple of things. I think one is how important it is to recognize the contextual nature of what's meaningful. And what I mean by this is that we ended up finding some things that were very interesting and other things we found we didn't expect to find. And there were other things that we expected to find to be significant that turned out not to be. And so the big implication of this, I think for many of the managers listening here, is that what works in one context may not necessarily work in your context. And that's why I think it's very important that organizations do things like this, because it helps them better understand what's most important at their organization, in their business unit, and therefore what it is that they should be looking for when they're trying to hire and develop the reps.
There you go. Simple plug. Nate's always looking for more data. So University of South Florida, Nate Hartmann, if you want to take a look at your reps. Tiffany, what about you? I mean, you lead these teams, so you've learned some things that you're going to do differently, but what do you believe is transferable to me, the average sales leader at any other company?
For us, the takeaway wasn't just the numbers. It was how to use them to design better systems for our people. The data is only powerful if it translates into how you hire and coach and communicate every day. So for us, the lesson was, use data to humanize performance, don't mechanize it. And then when your leaders can connect metrics to meaning, that's where the growth really happens. And we were able to take these insights and put them right into our organization immediately and start to see change. So it was amazing.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazegrowth.com.
So Tiffany, as I think about this again, because you're an outsourced partner to these companies and running these sales programs, sometimes you're running them as their sales programs, sometimes you're demonstrating to them programs they might take back inside. As you share with these companies what you've learned in this research and how it impacts your hiring and then helps your teams perform better, Do you see this as something Infinity can bring back to their clients, and their clients should start thinking about applying these same things as well?
Absolutely. It's a differentiator, right? So we're able to go to the boardroom, whether it be a weekly business review, quarterly business review, or just a client meeting, and talk about studies that we did with Dr. Hartmann and bring that to the table and have it be fact-based and not just assumptions.
Nate, she calls you Dr. Hartmann all the time. Am I supposed to do that?
I don't buy anything.
Oh, I think it's awesome. I love it. It's super respectful. And maybe that's my problem. I'm not respectful enough. Dr. Nate Hartmann, now you've dug into some of this data that is being produced by these different selling, I'll call them, we can call them labs now almost, except it's real world. It's not pretend. It's not simulations. It's not hypothetical. What are you looking forward to next? Like, what other things would you want to study, either as an extension of what you found here or just other things that you've got your eye on that you think the sales community needs to know?
We've done a very good job at is looking at the data that is easy to access and easy to analyze. And that tends to be what we refer to as structured data. And so it's data that's cleanly organized that we can put into a regression model and predict an outcome variable with very, very minimal effort. But where the real richness lies is with unstructured data. And that might be notes that are happening after a call, or it might be with what's being said during a call. And if we're able to extract information from this unstructured data, put some order to it, we can all of a sudden start looking at things that we've never really looked at before. And that might be things like sales processes, or it could be specific applications of sales techniques. And the opportunities are almost endless.
Yeah, so unstructured, like email content, words, what's sent, what replies you get, call recordings and transcripts, I'm assuming, notes that people are putting into CRM. Is that the kind of unstructured data that you're talking about? All right. And Tiffany, you guys collect that, gather that, and I would imagine somewhat religiously document all that stuff. You fired up to have Nate dig into that?
We've already, without saying too much, we've already had a meeting with Dr. Hartmann for talks of Q1 of our next study. So yes.
I'm interested because you said some things earlier, Nate, about skills. And sometimes I feel like skills are hard to find in structured data. They show up maybe better in unstructured data. But you already have a couple findings that you had. I took a note. Adaptive selling and objection handling came to the top as skills associated with high performers, like distinct skills. You know, there's I'm sure a lot of other skills. In your mind, how and why did why did they begin to separate high from low performers who are not doing those as well, but are doing something like table stakes, right? So yeah, what's your take on those two particular skills?
With adaptive selling, where I believe it comes down to is people want solutions for them. They don't want a solution that fits everybody and that's going to also then be relevant to them. And I think what good adaptive sellers are able to do is to be able to express what it is about a solution that's going to be most beneficial for the customer. And the other part of this is that they're able to hone in on those features and that are going to be most relevant to a customer. And the conversation then flows on that, and also what it is that those unique features are going to allow them to do. And then when they look about objective handling, I think it's very natural for people to have questions and to have concerns about solutions and what the real value of a solution is going to be for them. And salespeople that are better at being able to understand what the core of these objections are and then craft responses around that, I think are always going to be more successful. And so to me, I think one of the real interesting opportunities is being able to pair some of what it is that we've done with the structured data, so to speak, with our first study, with things that we could do in the future by looking at how it is that adaptive sellers sell more effectively and how it is that these salespeople that are handling objections better are actually doing that. And I think what's very valuable about that is that the insights that we gain can then be taught to other people. And so it becomes less about being able to figure out what differentiates one from the next, but it becomes about how it is that we can bring the person who may not be performing as well as somebody else up to that person's standard level.
Well, I think what both of those sort of speak to this idea that it's less about being scripted and less about going on the paper, if you will. Tiffany, as you think about training up teams who serve multiple different types of clients, I would assume like some level of adherence and strict governance over what gets said and how it gets said. It's just part of that. But yet now you realize also that the ability for them to flex well is super important. How do you make sure that happens inside of a team where you want consistency, but you realize that what sets people apart is their ability to be dynamic in the moment?
Yeah, we really want to avoid scripts. Some of our clients, compliance, they may have to have scripted parts, but we like to talk about talk tracks. It's all about having a conversation, and adaptive selling and objection handling. That's going to give you confidence, right? If you can just have a natural conversation and be able to handle those hurdles that the customer is giving to you, it makes sense that you're going to be a top seller, right? Because you have that confidence. And so in our training, we want to make sure that our account executives have that confidence, but also have the bones, the framework of the conversations they need to have, and have the tools so that they're not a robot reading those scripts and just, we want to make sure it's a very natural conversation.
Yeah. And I think figuring out underlying what makes somebody good at those things, which arguably there are some skills to learn and then there's practice to be done, I think it would be a great next study. If that's the direction you all are headed, I think, we'll have to come back and revisit that in Q1 sometime to see if we're able to uncover that and then ideally codify that so it is trainable, learnable, and scalable. Nate, any other things you're working on in research land that we should have our eyes on, or any favorites that are kind of out there right now that our audience should be taking a look at?
So, and any time that we're able to understand things from a different perspective, it can be helpful. And so to belabor the point, so to speak, I think if we can make sense of these data sources that we typically wouldn't turn to, we're going to get much further as a field and a discipline than we are by continuing to invest in the well-explored charted areas of structured data.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. And the best part is we're generating more and more of it as call recordings become prevalent and there's a lot of sales engagement content being captured. That means there's going to be a lot of hidden insights that we can unearth. And I think that's going to be exciting for the industry. And I appreciate the collaboration because I think some of it's going to come from this team right here. Again, the work Infinity does with all these companies running multiple different types of engagements and giving us a rich data set. And Dr. Nathan Hartmann being able to analyze it in such a way that makes it practical and usable. So I just want to thank you both for bringing this recent content to light. And I think it's a budding collaboration that we're going to hear more from in the future. So thank you, Nate and Tiffany. I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Another great conversation. Thank you so much to our guests, Nate and Tiffany. And thank you, as always, to Tim. And thank you for listening or watching on your favorite podcast app. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Emblazers show so you can keep up with these conversations. We'll see you next time.